What if I told you that one of the most Michael Carrick-like midfielders in England doesn't even play in the Premier League yet? That he's been mentored for the past 3 years by Carrick himself? Well, this is Hayden Hackney. 22 years old, built in Boro's academy, and maybe, just maybe, the exact kind of midfielder that Manchester United are crying out for. Today I'm going to break down his rise, what makes him special, and why Manchester United should really consider sniffing out a deal for this guy before somebody else does. So Hackney joined Middlesbrough at the under-10s and has represented the club at every youth level since. After progressing through their academy, he signed his first professional contract in 2019 and made his debut for them in the FA Cup against Brentford. In spite of this, regular first team minutes were hard to come by, leading to a loan move to League Two side Scunthorpe United in the 21-22 season. There, he racked up 31 appearances in a struggling side. And whilst it was a tough campaign that ended in relegation, Hackney did mention how the experience helped him learn the physical side of the game and how to get used to losing. So he'd fit greatly with us if he's used to losing, I suppose. But all jokes aside, the learning of the physical game is the main thing to take away from this. I've been saying over and over again how physicality is the weakest point, ironically, of the squad. Whether you like it or not, whether you think it should be this way or not, at least in the Premier League this is, having a team of athletes is almost more important than having a team of footballers sometimes. The ability to win your duels, run endlessly, just fight the opposition, it is a must in modern day Premier League football. However, Hackney's loan at Scunthorpe wasn't without controversy. He received a 6-game suspension for spitting at another player. Now make of that what you will. It's an absolutely horrible thing to do, I think. I don't foresee a circumstance in where that should ever happen. But it was a long time ago, and he does at least seem to have grown since then. So if Hackney has used this as an excuse to mature, then you know what, yeah, sure, cool, we'll roll with it. The problem is that when he then returned to Middlesbrough, he was mostly ignored by the then manager at the time, Chris Wilder. But everything changed under interim boss Leo Perkovic, who handed Hackney his first start of the 22-23 season. And from that moment, he became unstoppable. And when Michael Carrick took over, well, the two just hit it off at an instant connection. He embodied what Carrick believed in amidst the midfield battle. Hackney was essentially his eyes and ears on the pitch. And considering how great Carrick was and how much we would kill for a profile player like that right now, that's a very rare and helpful talent for Hackney to possess. But what does that even mean? What is the Michael Carrick style of football? Well, in January 2020, the FA released a great video of Michael Carrick breaking down the art of passing in the midfield and receiving it. One of the things he mentions is what makes the best pass. Obviously, we all love a Scholes-esque pinger across midfield, but as Carrick mentions, sometimes the best pass is just a simple 3-yarder. It's essentially whatever allows the next best phase of play to occur. Furthermore, he speaks about pass appreciation and how a good pass is one that gives your teammate less to do upon receiving it. Basically, a teammate shouldn't be having to make 2 or more touches from your pass to get it under control and move on to the next phase of play. Here's an example, right? It's from a couple of years ago. It's Hackney versus Burnley. Now, this will seem like such a nothing pass in the grand scheme of things, but it's exactly what Carrick means. Hackney finds himself with the ball, and he has time and space to turn and make one of those Scholes-esque switches of play himself if he wanted. But he takes the easier and smarter approach. He makes the simple, quick, short pass that allows his teammate to make the first time pass himself and create the counter quicker. It's a tiny action that saved just that split second, but it created a chance, which is something Carrick spoke about. How important it is to scan around and learn your environment. By doing this, you can see the pass that you want to make, but you also know that it's actually 3 passes away, and it's your role to start that passing chain off, which is exactly what Hackney did in that clip. By the way, the reason I picked that specific clip to show off that is because it's not the kind of one you usually see in a highlight montage, which can occasionally be a bit misleading. Often, the more mundane aspects of a game tell the bigger picture. But this isn't a coincidence. Hackney has, of course, spent the last 3 years under Carrick's direct coaching, and it shows. Whether he's dropping into the back line or stepping into the half spaces, Hackney plays like a conductor. always in control and always thinking of the next step ahead. And so let's head into the data, because that's the fun stuff, right? Well, he's pretty elite there as well. Hackney attempts over 74 passes per 90, placing him in the 96th percentile among midfielders outside the top 5 leagues. But the quality of those passes, as I've said, is what's important. 99th percentile for progressive passes, 97th percentile for progressive carries, 91st percentile for shot creating actions. This tells us that he doesn't just make the safe pass, he's also the one breaking the lines, stretching defences, creating those chances. Like I said, he knows how to make the right pass. Now, he also ranks in the 94th percentile for shots per 90, 80th percentile for non-penalty goals, and 77th percentile for expected assists. So really, whether it's pulling strings from deep or arriving late into the box, Hackney is involved in pretty much every phase of play. It's probably why the likes of Wilcox and Amorim are kind of interested in him. That being said, he is not a defensive monster per se. He's not a Kante-esque pure ball winner, but he is disruptive. He's super aggressive. But here is where it gets wild. Against every other under 23 midfielder globally, Hackney ranks number 1 in all of the following categories: most touches, most defensive duels won, most progressive carries,
most passes completed, most forward passes completed, most short passes completed, most progressive passes, most accurate passes to the final third.
Let that sink in. Hackney is statistically unmatched across the world in his age group for control, distribution, progression, and that is why he's such an incredible prospect to slot into that number 8 position for Manchester United. I think he is as box to box as they can possibly come. And we know that Ineos' transfer strategy for Amorim is to buy versatile players. Ones that can suit his system with strong athleticism and physicality, but also players that can perform in another system. For example, Dorgu can play left wing back, but he can also play left back. Mbemo, if we get him, can play right 10, but he can also play right wing. Cunha can be the left 10, or he could be the long-term Bruno replacement in the central 10 of a 4-2-3-1 or a 4-3-3. He can also play as one of the midfield too. And so whilst Hackney would most probably look to partner Bruno in the 8, I think his best position would actually be to be his replacement in the 8 in the long term. Yeah, I personally am not quite sold on him being the partner to Bruno. I know it would probably suit what Amorim wants to play, but personally, I prefer a midfield 2 to be more yin and yang, you could say. Players that can perform in all aspects of the field, but one that specialises more defensively and one that specialises more offensively. Bruno can, of course, do both aspects, but he's far better going forward. Someone like Casemiro can, again, do both aspects, but on his day, he's much better defensively. And I think Hackney is more of a Bruno than a Casemiro here. And that's what we need to replace, really. That being said, it's not to say that Hackney and Bruno can't work together, it's just my personal footballing philosophy. Because, like I said, Hackney knows how to make that smart pass. Bruno, as much as I love him, not so much. He will always pick the low percentage, high reward pass whenever it is physically possible. Don't get me wrong, that's not a terrible thing. He has won us countless games because of that. But what we miss in the 8 right now is a true tempo setter, a Michael Carrick, you could say. Problem is, I don't think Manchester United will be able to sign Hackney on the cheap, or at least not the super cheap, which I think a lot of people expect. Several Premier League clubs have been circling this summer, and Tottenham are reportedly readying a £20 million bid, with scouts lining up to assess him in the under-21 Euros. In fact, scouts at Spurs have apparently been watching this guy for quite a few years now, and so I think with him having a couple of years left in his contract and Spurs also being interested, I genuinely think it could take a fee of around £30 million plus to get him. I know that sounds insane, right? But if Spurs really have opened the bidding at 20, then I don't see how it's not. And I don't know if United can afford that right now. I'd also unselfishly quite like to see him under Thomas Frank, I'm not going to lie. I think he'd cook there. Anyway, whilst Hayden Hackney might not be the biggest name on Manchester United's transfer list this summer, in 2 or 3 years it could be yet another example of a player we wish we had. We always wish we could find the next Casados, Whartons, Balebas before they become 80 million plus players. Well, Hackney could be one. We'll just have to wait and see, I suppose. But would you take Hayden Hackney at United? Drop your thoughts below, and don't forget to like, sub, ding that notification bell, you know the deal. Because we'll have more scouting breakdowns for you coming very soon. But in the meantime, you might want to check this one out on your screen right now, who I think could be a very cheap, good market opportunity for that defensive destroyer that I mentioned earlier.